Hey y'all, this is Brown at I have Brown, and I will be doing a review tonight, but before I make a video for that, I wanted to talk a little bit about my grandpa. Um, my grandfather, Robert E. Mangieri, passed away on November 17th around 12 o'clock, and that's November 17th of this year, so a couple weeks ago. And he was 90 years old, and he passed in his sleep. So his death was not altogether unexpected because he'd been having some memory problems and some health problems, you know. And ironically, I mean, he was in the process of, seeing, a doctor or two for said health problems, but then other things happened and things kind of just dovetailed, and then you throw in a stroke, and well, that basically, sped along the decline, and then, uh, yeah, and he passed away, and I mean, it was like because of his age, I mean, we had the feeling. When I say we, I mean like the people in his immediate circle, like family members, loved ones, and what have you. I mean, we had the feeling that he didn't have a whole lot of time left because of his age and also because of the health issues. But at the same time, I mean, you always think you have more time, and unfortunately, I mean, you just never know when the time's going to come when you know your family member, your loved one or friend or what have you, or you yourself. I mean, we never know when our time's going to be, and so you know when the stroke happened and sped things along, it was just like we weren't expecting that. I mean, we had a feeling he was going to pass soon, but at the same time, we thought we'd have more time, and it just didn't work out like that. And it's weird. I mean, even if their passing is not unexpected, it still leaves a mark. And I mean, he was the last grandparent I had left, and you know and I just realized that with him gone, I mean, that's basically the passing of a generation right there in my family. And I mean, the same can be said for anyone's family. Like when all of their grandparents are gone, I mean, that's the end of that generation too. And so yeah, I mean, he was a kind, very friendly man, with a good sense of humor. Even when things were bad, I mean, yeah, you could tell he'd be upset about something, but then he'd turn around and, you know, make a little joke, just to kind of, put you at ease, because he didn't want you to be upset. And, I mean, he loved mowing his lawn. He had this straw hat they'd wear, and he had this, dark bandana they put around it. And, he was in the Navy, back in his younger days, of course. And there was a plane they worked on. I believe it's called a Marlin, but, he told me, some stories, about, his days in the Navy and when he was working on the Marlin. And he's just told me all sorts of stories, I mean, from, I guess, his life. And unfortunately, I don't remember all of them. I wish I'd had the presence of mind to record these stories or write them down. But, I mean, the stories I do remember, I mean, they kind of, gave me a glimpse of a different time, in life. And, he also, he liked Budweiser and Dos Equis. I mean, Budweiser, when I was actually living with him, my mom and I were living with him and grandma, and Budweiser was beer of choice. I mean, it was just like something that he would do once in the evening. Like during dinner, he'd get a beer and pour it into this frosted mug, and there you go. And I remember always to be fascinated, watching the beer when the beer was being poured, and then as the liquid was being put into the glass, and then you'd see like all the foam come out and everything. And I was always fascinated watching that when I was a kid. So when fast forward several years later, and I'm old enough to drink, I mean, he gladly had a beer with me, and you know, um, around that time, he was more of a Dos Equis guy than a Budweiser guy. But I'm glad to say that I got to have a couple of beers with him at different points. I mean, a Budweiser and a Dos Equis. So it was cool to finally get to have a drink with my grandpa. But yeah, he was also one of the people that got me into stuff like Call of the Wild. I mean, that'd be more my dad, but my grandpa had something to do with that too. Um, because he had these Reader's Digest editions of classic stories like Hunchback of Notre Dame. I mean, that was another thing that he kind of got me into through that. Um, and we would watch some old movies together. We watched like this black and white version of Mutiny on the Bounty a long time ago, and you know, and he was telling me about some history stuff about um, how life was back then and what have you. Because I mean, he did like his Navy history and or his um, I guess you could say um, sailing history. And so, but he also liked to build. There was a time where he liked to build model airplanes, and I remember, you know, the plane I remember for sure. Like I remember all three planes they built for me, for sure. But the name I actually remember for one of them was the Flying Tiger, and it was smaller than the other two, but I just remember thinking, how cool it was, because it had this sort of monster face on the front of it, because apparently that's how they actually painted the planes back then. It's around World War II. Um, and there was another plane, a model airplane they built around that time, and I want it was like a blue and white plane, and I want to say it was called the Avenger, but don't quote me on that. But I'm pretty sure it's the Avenger. Unfortunately, I don't remember what the other plane was, but no, I do remember that he liked building model airplanes. And another movie that we watched together was there were two other movies I remember that we watched together. The Longest Day, because he loved his war movies, right? Old black and white World War II movie. I mean, all-star cast, great stuff. And we also watched Dances with Wolves, and then I remember another movie we watched together um, was called Hoosiers, and it's a basketball movie with Gene Hackman, and that was a good one too. But I remember the reason we watched that was because at the time I was in elementary school and I was on a basketball team for the YMCA. And I don't think I was on the team for that long. I wasn't particularly good, but because I was tall, it's like, hey, throw this guy in, But um, I had a couple of, good moments though. But it was mainly because of that, though, that Grandpa and I watched Hoosiers together, and I remember during like the basketball games, he and my grandma would be there with my mom and my dad and stepmom, so it was like all the family was there. But Hoosiers, though, we got to walk. Grandpa wanted to watch that with me because of the basketball team. Um, so yeah, just a lot of good memories there, and no, I'm gonna miss him. I really am. And another thing I liked about him was that it's like when you're a little kid, you talk, you're there's always a family member or two that you know they're kind enough to let you talk their ear off about kid stuff, right? And Grandpa, he was like that. So he'd be working in the yard or something, but I'd be talking about, I don't know, some kind of comic book, or I think at one point I was even telling him about you know the death of Superman and the reign of the Superman. I was telling him about uh, John Henry Irons, Steel, right? And but I remember though, one of the things I remember about that was there's a part of you there's a part of me that was thinking that he's not really listening. I mean, he's just being kind and allowing me to talk, right? But then he turned around and asked me a question about what I was telling him about. And I realized, even as a kid, I was like, he really is paying attention. So he was always cool about stuff like that. And even as I got older, and you know lines of conversation would turn to more, I guess you could say, grounded stuff, more real stuff. He would try and give me some feedback on things, and I regret to say that to some degree, I think I may have taken him for granted in that respect. Uh, I I don't know. Maybe we all do that to some degree, or I don't know if we all do that, but because it's like I thought he was always going to be there, as a kid and a younger man. But then you get older and you become an adult, and you're like, okay, we've all got an expiration date. But you know, I'm glad I'm glad that he was my grandpa, and I'm glad that we got to spend the time together that we did. And you know I'm glad that he was the man that he was. I mean, I'm gonna miss him. And so I guess I just wanted to just talk about him a little bit. And also I just wanted to give the little bit of advice here, just that if anyone's listening and you still have your grandparents in your life, and especially if you're on good terms with them, spend some time with them. I mean, whether it's long distance, just making a phone call, or if they live close by, I mean, or going to see them, I mean, take the time to talk to them, listen to them, spend time with them. I don't know, take them out for lunch or something. That I got to do that with Grandpa a couple of times, but not as often as I would have liked. But if you're able to do that, fantastic. So it just spend time with your grandparents if they're still in your lives, and savor the time that you have with them. And if you can, learn from them. I learned some stuff from my grandpa, but I wish I'd learned more. I wish I'd been more inclined to listen to more, I guess you could say, educational information that came from him. But he was my grandpa, and I'm glad he was in my life, and he was the last grandparent I had, and I'm gonna miss him. So thanks for tuning in here to listen to me talk about my grandpa. Yeah, I appreciate it. And take care. Good night.